Good morning and afternoon. It's Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Welcome all to the Sharing Show. I'm Kane, and today I'm joined with David, better known as the Workday Sharing Guy, guest co-host Ryan, Logan, Teresa, and special guests.
Thank you, Kane. What is the most important thing about Zoom chat?
Thank you, Logan. The most important thing on this show today about Zoom chat is that we would like you all to share and participate. So if you are chatting or asking a question or answering someone else's question, please make sure you select all panelists and attendees. With that said, it's time to start the show. So over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Kane. So for all of you, I'd love you to test out your chat. Make sure you set your default to all panelists and attendees or everyone. And if your Share-a-thon status for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, September 29th, 30th, and October 1, if you're registered for all 3 days, put R3 in there. If you're registered for 2 days, R2, 1 day, R1. If you're not sure, you're going to look it up on Community, put C. And if you're not going to be able to attend this year, we will miss you.
Okay, and Logan, I'm going to just point out to people, sometimes they want to know, where do you look on Community? Search for the word Olympics on Community, and then you'll get these links. And here's one of them, and this is a page I'm updating every day. It's a countdown. We're down now to 12 days. And for those who are paying attention here, in 2 weeks is September 30th. So the middle of the 3 days of this 3-day September-October Share-a-thon is Wednesday, September 30th. We will be here on the show, as well as in the middle of a 3-day Share-a-thon.
What's up next on
the agenda? Next up, we have our co-host Ryan from Dallas.
Hello, everybody. Ryan from Texas. I've been in the ecosystem for 9 years, approaching 10, actually. It's turned the calendar. My Workday journey began as an implementer on the partner side. This is my second appearance in the Sharing Show. I was previously a guest. In addition to HCM, I also do advanced compensation, talent and performance, and security.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Would you like to say anything about the picture on the bottom left, or that backyard picture on your LinkedIn profile?
Yes, well, obviously that is not my backyard. That is more of a 1 day. Hopefully, that is my backyard. But yeah, proud member of Fort Worth. I've lived here for the past 20 years.
Awesome, thanks, Ryan.
So we want to talk about our themes for the Sharing Show. Today, September 16th, we have Advanced Comp. And that's going to be followed by our Share-a-thon prizes on September 30th. And then for October 14th, well, we're looking for any themes you might be interested in. Reach out to us. And then October 28th, we may have another scary show. And what's next on the agenda? Next, we have David, the Sharing Guy.
Okay, thank you, Teresa and Logan. Here's a reminder from the last show. We've updated this picture here. These are the votes that have come in. Over 400 people now have registered for the combination of the 3-day Share-a-thon followed by the Olympics. So the blue line are the most popular topics. Reporting calc fields, dashboards, and composite reports. Typically, those all get rated high. But just to point out, business process, security, recruiting, onboarding, those had the highest votes. But if you take a look here at the next line, this is because some of you might be putting together your presentations. You could put together a presentation on anything, even if it's not listed here, but we need the presentations, to make this a share-a-thon. It's not a presentation like what we're doing here. It's not the Sharing Show. It's a share-a-thon, several hours for 3 consecutive days. You get to polish your presentations. 15 minutes is probably the minimum we'd want, but even just a 5 to 10 minute share, any sort of PowerPoint, send it in to us and we'll get you on the agenda. Again, this is in 2 weeks, under 2 weeks. On the first day, Tuesday the 29th, we just announced our special keynote is Dave Sohigian, CTO from Workday, CTO North America Workday. And his title of his presentation is How to Juggle Learning Workday, Learning Anything. So make sure to register for that. I would like actually now, similar to what Logan did, test your chat. In the chat, put yes or YR, yes, and you've already registered for September 29th keynote. We have a different checkbox for that. We just want to get a good count so Dave knows how many people are coming. It's noon Pacific time on Tuesday, September 29th. Okay, thank you for everyone who's putting that in the chat. We have one final thing on the chat. Are you attending the Olympics? So we have teams for the Olympics, 2 to 6 per team. You could create a regional user group team. You could create a company team or the open category. R, you've registered for the Olympics. I means you're participating as an individual. And for your team, so RICO, RICO would mean that you've registered, you're an individual, you've got a company team you plan on doing, and you would like to be on open team. Now, I know some people already just sent me questions about this. You can be on a user group team, one company team, and an open team. So you could be on up to 3 teams. And the whole time you're participating as an individual as well. So more about this on the community. As far as the cahoots, here on the Sharing Show, we have cahoots like, what are the names of these 2 puppies? If you were on the show last week, you would know the names of those 2 puppies. That's not what the Olympics are about. The Olympics will have Kahoot questions from past airings of the Sharing Show, but it will not be asking you what the names of those puppies are. Extra points if anyone could actually put that in the chat now, but let's get on with the show.
So what's next on the agenda? Next, it looks like we have Andre from the UK.
Hey, Andre here from the UK. Thank you. I was the co-host on the last show where we were talking about 2020 R2, and I'm really speaking to any of the sharers who are in Europe who've seen the last slide of David talking about the Workday Olympics, who want to participate from this side of the Atlantic. So again, exactly the same sort of rules. So around, if you want to join as a regional user group or as a company, get together, sign up, and it's going to be in the afternoon in the European time zone and early morning, so for the early birds over in the US on Friday, the 2nd of October.
Okay, thank you, Andre. I just want to point out, I appreciate you reaching out, helping people in Europe form teams, because I did put on the SurveyMonkey 2 a.m. start time for me, Pacific. I'm going to form a team of people here on the West Coast who want to wake up at 2 a.m. and take on anybody from Europe. But of course, Andre, let's see how many people respond to your LinkedIn messages about this. Thank you, Andre.
And what's next on the agenda? Next, we're going back to Ryan, our co-host.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. So my topic today is Beginner's Guide to Loading Budget Pools. Now, most people would go on a show to speak eloquently about something that they know better than anyone else. Well, this would not be one of those times. Despite being in the ecosystem for almost 10 years and having built dozens of compensation processes, I'm here to talk about something that I've only actually done a handful of times. That's loading budget pools from an EIB. Most of the processes I've worked with just fine with configuring the plans correctly and using the calculated bottoms-up calculations or manually entering the top-down options. And even if this included some manual adjustments of individual groups, we didn't need to load them all in. However, sometimes the bottoms-up calculation just isn't representative of what the company wishes to spend, and the top-down doesn't spread things out correctly across the orgs. So if this is also combined with high volume of orgs needing manipulation, you might be loading budget pools. So obviously this news can hit people different ways. Initially, it's kind of in disbelief that I couldn't handle it through the other options. And then it was a little bit of fear because I hadn't done it before and I was doing it under a tight timeline, and everything indicated this was kind of a finicky process. But when I finally accepted my fate and educated myself in there, and after a significant number of iterations and frustration, I was able to finally understand the process related to the EIB and make it repeatable and ultimately lead to some success. Let's start with the basics. When do you do this? You cannot do this before it is initiated. So you would need to load the EIB during the distribute pools step. This means you have to allow some time for it at this point in the process. Now, the web service can be set up ahead of time and should be. It is called Import Compensation Review Budget Pools. And Workday provides a most excellent delivered report called Compensation Review Budget Pools Report. This report makes the entire process possible as it dumps things out in almost the same way that the EIB needs to be populated. And obviously, there are some reasons why this is a little bit intimidating initially, and it is because the EIB is extremely finicky. The EIB itself it behaves like an EIB in a lot of cases. Sometimes it doesn't. It takes a lot of iterations to get it right, and it pretty much needs to go on the current org structure or the current information that you have at that time, which means that you tend to need to make adjustments frequently, real time. So this is, over the next handful of slides, I'm going to walk through this process. Everything you see on the screen is example data only and probably doesn't even tie together from table to table. The important thing to get out of this is to know the purpose of each component, the order, and how they interact with each other. If you have many different award types, this will not show how everything fits in, but I will reference them as we move through. We're going to start with the initiation of the review process. And once you reach the distribute pools step, this is where you're going to start needing to act. Now, the review distribute pool step, I'm just putting a screenshot on here to let everybody know where we are in the process. This is where you would also be able to manually adjust pools, but this is where we'll need to start the process for loading. This is where we'll run the compensation review budgets report and export it to Excel. Now, this report extracts rows for every single supervisory organization in your tenant. The orgs who have members eligible for your process will generate a row for every award type that is present, and the initial pool values, obviously targets will not be shown here, but you will have some values in column G of this report initially. Now, the red box, I want to point out the red box, this is going to come up later. The way that this report is written is it's pre-formatted for use with the companion kind of EIB. And so the number of orgs and how they are stacked are very important. The red box shows that for each org, it's going to put a row out for each award type. That is very important to recall. So just stepping away and focusing a little bit more on that report with a few other commentary. It pulls all relevant content needed for the EIB. It is formatted in the EIB friendly way. By far, if you don't hear anything else about this report, understand that you should not erase rows and do not erase extra orgs that have no values at this time. There would be a lot of orgs that just have 0 values. The compulsion is to clean up their file and only have the ones that have value. Do not do that. Resist the urge at this point in time to erase rows or extra orgs that have no values. The next is to export the template for the EIB, and that again is the import compensation review budget pools. Now, one of the first things it's going to need is a reference ID. The EIB requires it, so the best way to control this is to go to the active process, do the related actions, edit the reference ID to something that is usable and specific, obviously, to that process, and make sure that that goes in the first tab of your EIB. So now you can begin to populate the EIB, the main tab of the EIB. One thing I want to stop and say here is that a lot of the information that you're going to use to populate the information here is going to come from the minds of the compensation team. So a step that I'm kind of glossing over here is that there is going to be a significant interaction with the compensation team in order to identify exactly what those pool values are. The report allows you to, it can be used as a template and should be used as a template for compensation. Once they provide that information to you, you can pretty much then cut and paste the information from the report into this EIB template. Key points on this EIB piece is the numbering. A lot of people mess up on the numbering. Once you know how it behaves, it's easy to repeat, but it's basically for every process, you're going to have ones all the way down the line on column B. On column C, you're going to increment numbers based upon each organization. And then in column F, you'll increment each award type. Now, at this point in time, I'm saying this is pretty vanilla. We're just loading in the pool values for those award types. Obviously, things can get much more complicated. You can have other pools that you're doing. You can do separate out promotion pools, other pools adjustments, holdbacks. Those particular pieces of information can also be put on the EIB and would be found further to the right. For simplicity's sake, though, just going to show you this and give you the starter kit. Obviously, things, if you need to incorporate those other items, you're going to need to spend a little bit more time in this activity, testing where those things fit and making sure that they load properly.
Okay, and Ryan, just a quick question. So the report had in it these reference IDs, and the reference IDs just get copied directly in this. Don't remove any rows, just exact copy, right?
That's correct. I think on the report, there's actually some plan names that you don't need to pull in here, but yes, definitely column D, column G, and column H come directly off of that report. The report does not have the numbering, so you'll have to put the numbering in here.
Got it. Okay, that's the focus on the numbering. And then I see in the chat that people are already forming teams for the Olympics, but if anyone has any questions about reference IDs, go to the chat because we're going to keep going here, but some people might not know about reference IDs. Put something in the chat and we could follow up with you after.
All right, so some of the things I've mentioned before, I'll just touch on again here. Use the report, cut and paste liberally from the report to make this EIB. The EIB must contain all of your organizations and all of the listed reward types. We referenced the numbering and the process reference ID in the first tab. And I spoke to this point, but I'm going to make it again. Holdbacks and other pools are loaded in columns to the right, but they are not part of the Workday report. So you will have to add those then on the EIB only. Okay, once you get the EIB in working order and you're loading it, there's likely to be, you could have a number of errors, but these are the two I want to point out here and the most likely. The top one has to do with if you did accidentally remove an org, or more likely you're trying to reuse a prior file with pools. For example, a test scenario, you had a prior test and you loaded all your pools in. Now you've got the next iteration of the test and you're just going to reuse the same file from before. Well, that would work unless there have been changes to your organization tree since those two things have changed. And then you're going to get the error at the top, which is that not all organizations are configured on that file. In that particular case, you will need to go back to the report, rerun the report, match up your EIB to the report, and add any missing organizations that may have been dropped off. Now, the second error is also common too for the same reasons. And this error, not all plans award types are configured in the web service. This is indicative of an org may be present, but it has an award type that you have not allowed a row for. In this particular instance, the report is your friend. Go back to the delivered report and add any rows that are missing. Once you're successfully loaded and the compensation admin just needs to confirm the pool values in the tool are correctly loaded now, and the process then continues on as usual. So you've successfully tamed the beast. So is loading budget pools fun? No, not really. It's not one of the more enjoyable activities I've done in the Workday space. Is it complicated? Yeah, it can be, especially if you have some of those other components. If you do have a lot of those other components, or you have a large number of award types, a large number of organizations, and you also are doing holdbacks and separate promotion budgets and adjustment budgets and stuff, it can get very complicated. You need to allow enough time to make sure that everything that you need to have in there is, you know how to populate it and it loads correctly. So is it a useful skill? No. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And but you need to take time to understand how the inputs are incorporated, and you need to leave adequate time to do that. And what I mean by adequate time, I'll specify. You're going to initiate the process, and then at some point in time, everybody's going to look at you and go, hey, HRT needs to load the pools. Can you get that done in like 5 minutes? It may not take you 5 minutes. You may need to just understand and set expectations that needs to, you need to make sure that file is right and stop down for that. But if you get it all right, and ultimately it will save you time in the long run, because you're not putting all these stuff in manually. So hopefully that was helpful to anybody.
Thank you, Ryan.
And what's next on the agenda? Next, we have Caroline from New England.
Thanks. Thank you, Ryan. And after you've spent all that time learning how to load in budget pools, what's the most logical thing to do? Well, you want to hide them in the comp review process. So what I'd like to talk about today is how you can hide budget pools. Previously in Workday, the only option you had when you wanted to hide a bonus pool was within your configuration. There's a little checkbox on display remaining pools, and you'd merely uncheck it. But they really didn't give you any flexibility. And that's what you're really looking for when you want to hide pools. Maybe due to the type of process you're running, might be confusing or disheartening when managers only have 1 or 2 employees and they're just looking at a small budget. There may be other additional adjustments or lump sums that only pertain to a particular part of the organization, and you don't want that visibility. Maybe you're deducting your promotion budget from your merit budget and you don't want to show that, or you're hiding equity if equity is only distributed to specific levels. There's multiple reasons. So you're looking for flexibility. I want to say it came with Workday 33, the ability to create compensation review options. There's a couple of ways to get at it, but you're going to create this option In this particular case, I'm calling it promotion nomination. And there are multiple elements within this configuration that you have control over. I'm only going to focus on the pool section, but obviously if you want to change your search reports, you have customized search reports. Or if your approvals and visibility, perhaps you're changing it from entire hierarchy to just the one level up. But these are all, I just wanted to show all sections of the configuration, but here's where you can hide your pools. And there are multiple pools here. I'm just showing the ones that came up on my screen. In this instance, I'm going to hide additional adjustment and promotion. And there's one more section where you can set participation rules. So you've saved that. And what I really like to use comp review templates, because that way you can gather all of your data for your process. It makes testing go a lot faster. So I'm creating a new template for what I'm calling promotion nomination. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this screen. You can set your dates. On the right-hand side, you can choose your grid, and then you have got your comp review options. So you're allowed to create your review options within that, but we've already done that. We can select promotion nomination, and then we go to initiate a comp review process, and you're going to select your template, and that will determine some of the other elements that show up within the initiate process. Put in your grid, you'll get award types. And here's where you're going to actually name your process if you haven't done so. And since you've selected comp review options, it will show up here. And in this instance, administrators are still able to view all the pools, but planners cannot. So planners may only see a market adjustment or a merit adjustment. In this particular instance, we ran a dummy promotion process to collect all the promotions that a company was going to have. We downloaded all that information, canceled the process, and then loaded all the positions in that were to use in the actual process itself. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caroline. So what's next on the agenda? We go back to Ryan, I believe, to talk about some compensation review tips.
Yeah, now we'll cover some submitted content on advanced compensation that has come in the last couple of days, and we'll read through these and comment. I'll ask Caroline to join me as well. So I believe these come to us from Susie. Is that right, David?
Yes, this is Susie from Dallas.
All right. Dallas is very close to Fort Worth, so these should be good. In lieu of a step delay, build in to-do steps so that you can control when process proceeds. I actually more see to-do steps, and I actually make use of to-do steps quite a bit. So I kind of prefer to-do steps in this, and it does allow for a certain degree of control. Caroline, anything to add?
No, I'm good. No, I go for simple.
But this is something I did not know. So once you submit the configure pool step, planners have access to compensation search reports immediately, even if you haven't processed the step to launch the next task inbox yet. I've actually never, this is news to me. I've never opened that up or seen that done, or typically, so this is actually news to me. I'm going to have to give this a try. Be aware that the visibility date will be stripped of promotions process within merit to permit. This is another one that I was not familiar with there too. But it makes sense. To prevent this, you can add a step within change job for promotions in the comp process to route to the compensation partner for review. Then they'll be able to add the visibility date back in. That's also a very good one to know. I have not made use of this trick either. This one I use all the time. So create compensation review validations that are never true as a placeholder. Yeah, so you can't add new ones once the process is started, but you can edit existing. So this is something that everybody should do. And they won't see them if they're not true, but you can definitely bend them to serve your will if they're there. So this is a great tip.
Okay, thank you, Ryan and Caroline, and especially so Susie in Dallas. This is an example of somebody who wasn't able to be live on the show, but had input for us. So this is great to share it, and it's a good prep for under 2 weeks from now. We have the 3-day share-a-thon. We are collecting information like this, so send us your PowerPoints.
So what's next on the agenda?
What do we have here next, Ryan, Caroline? What's coming up here next?
Caroline and I have had a discussion. We thought we'd open it up here too. A number of processes. Obviously, you have process period end dates. You have organizational snapshot dates, compensation snapshot dates, and there's processes that we've done where these are at the front end before you initiate the process. So those items, process period end date stuff happens before. And there are ones where some of these snapshot dates and stuff are set at the end of the process or closer to the effective date. And this is behavior that is kind of situational. What you choose when you choose to put your dates and stuff has a lot to do with answers to other types of questions. Caroline, is that a good way to set this up?
It is, and I noticed Nicole already put something in the chat. So if you want to just put 1, 2, or 3 in the chat of what sort of best describes how you date, have done it both ways, but we thought it'd be fun to see what people thought. Yeah. So Ryan, do you want to talk about these definitions? Because it looks like we have quite a few people who have not run a comp review process yet.
Oh, okay. So process period end date. So process period end date is this is the last date of the period by which you are going to, I guess, that particular process is driven by. A lot of times I think about it in terms of like, if it's an annual process, let's use calendar. So let's say that the process period end date is 12/31/2020. Okay, well, that means that the last calendar year, the look back from there, is your process period. That would essentially be the period that your review or your process is then going to be looking for. The organization snapshot date is the date by which it's looking for the structure of that organization. And by organization, I'm specifically talking about the organization by which that process is being run on. Most of the time it's supervisory. Other times it could be other orgs. Workday has allowed in the last couple of years to allow custom organization trees and stuff to be used as the hierarchy for processes. But org snapshot date is the date at which it takes a look at what that organization structure has, and that is where your planner structure, or how it moves, the process moves through the hierarchy, is that's the snapshot date that it uses for organization. Compensation snapshot date, same thing, but just with compensation. So base pay and all of your current bonus targets, everything on that day is what is going to be used for the process. And so if the effective date of the compensation review process is February, is out to next year, and the task is sent to, or so you're basically initiating on December 1 to send the process out, then we can talk about 2 different dates: November 30th, which is before the process is initiated, and February 1st, which is the effective date of the process. So there's a number of considerations, and we are trying to rope the wind a little bit by talking about this, because there's so many different things involved with this conversation. But let's boil it down to kind of these 3 types of things. If your compensation snapshot date, or your snapshot dates, November 30th, if your snapshot dates are November 30th, and your tool is open for how long? Is your tool open for 3 weeks? Is it open for 3 months? If it is open, like we're saying, and the process is not effective until February 1st, and you have a very long window, then all of your compensation and your work snapshot dates are going to be as of November 30th. And the longer your process is open, potentially, if you have a lot of volatility and movement and stuff, that could impact whether or not you want to continue to look to that date for information.
Yeah, you might, if it is very long, then you want to look to having it, on that same day as the effective date, because that way it captures all the changes, particularly if you have a lot of movement within your organization.
Correct. And also with participation rules, if you have a long cycle open, most likely you're not, that is impacting your decision to whether or not you're going to do a lockout and basically stop any and all movement while the tool is on. That implies that you're going to have a smaller window. If you have a much longer window, it implies that you're probably going to make use of participation rules that allow certain transactions, potentially even compensation and org-related transactions, to happen during the process. In that particular case, then that may also change where you take the snapshot date as well.
Also, it can affect if you release comp statements within Workday.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movement. You can have some issues with the manager that actually gets the comp statement. Is that the same person who's actually delivering the conversation?
Correct. Or
did all the planning?
Correct. And then that brings in much more, the more movement you have during the process, and the more, let me preface that by saying, the more allowable movement that you have during the process then could change. If you have a snapshot date that's more on the end of it, or February, then you are incorporating those changes and potentially the new base pay and all the targets, and potentially even the transition from one planner group to another planner group, you'd be allowing that to be involved in the tool and movement from pool values and stuff like that between planner groups. So there's a lot of considerations, and we can only just touch on them here. Another complexity is just are you running more than one process at the same time? Are you running a process for your executives and a process for everybody else simultaneously? Do you have 5 plans involved in your process, or do you have 50 plans involved in your process? Are you doing promotions? So the complexity does kind of play an overall situation. I guess the only real thing that we're deciding here is you need to kind of take a holistic view of what your process looks like in macro, and will you allow transactions to happen during, and if you do allow them to during, from a compensation standpoint, do you want to preserve the information that you had from the beginning of the process, or do you want it to allow it to reflect information that now has changed and be active at the end of the process?
And Ryan, it looks like overwhelmingly for people who put in, they're new to Workday, so have not done a process yet. But option 2, having everything be the effective date, is outrunning doing it, in the back. But in the chat, Deborah, the effective date is January 1 and we launch in mid-March. Ouch. Do you want to talk about that, Ryan? We still have transactions going on for role changes that impact the merit review through and past the mid-April end date.
So you have a retroactive effective date?
Yeah.
There are complications here that go beyond just what we're touching on here, because that you're gonna have an involvement of payroll and other things in those two to get a retroactive effective date back that far. But I mean, it's possible. I would also guess that you probably don't have a lot of volatility and movement, although you did say that you're just going to have. That's one we can't answer on this call.
Okay, wait. So that's maybe what we do here. So first off, I'm not sure which color robot either one of you are in the Rock'em Sock'em fight here. It sounds like you agree. Ryan, Caroline, are you in agreement here, or is there?
I mean, it really depends on the situation. I've done them both ways and in the same organization. So it depends on the type of cycle. There ends up being some manual work at some end, depending on your issues. It can be, internal mobility, whether you've got expats, a lot of considerations.
I think the biggest one for me is how long will your process be open? Because the longer your process is open, the more just the natural volatility of your organization kind of plays a role. You're going to have, if your process is open for 3 months, you're going to have to move somebody. And if you're crossing the end of the year, isn't it likely that companies always have some kind of like a minor or major reorganization event? If that happens during your process being open, that's complicated, very complicated. So it's to me the single, if I could point to one thing that I would identify more than anything else, is understanding how long your process needs to be open. And then I think that drives conversation around what concurrent processes should be allowed, will be allowed, how they impact. And then once you determine that, I think that then having the thought conversation around, okay, well, the compensation snapshot date before or after, I think that becomes that we've done the required pre-work then, and you can kind of determine and play it out both ways. But then you just got to test it.
Here's what I like to do. Deborah is a special, one of our special sharing fans, so don't want to cut her short. Let's wrap up the show, and then at the very end, before we actually end it, let's just see if more questions come in the chat. So Deborah, feel free to share more about your pain. It is real. So take to the chat here as we wrap up. And Ryan and Caroline, we might come back for final discussion.
Great, thanks so much. And now we would like to thank our co-sponsors. First, we have Team Up HR, and we want to thank them for blogs and newsletters, as well as the fact that Team Up HR now covers all things Workday. HR, financials, Workday Extend, Prism, reporting, integrations, security, you name it. At Team Up HR, we say, making Workday work for you. We'd also like to thank GQR. GQR is a global STEM staffing firm with a Workday practice focused on the customer ecosystem. Since their inception over 3 years ago, they've helped over 300 customers with hiring needs across the product and consulting resources for Phase X project needs. If you can think of an area of Workday, they have most likely helped a customer solve an issue or a staffing need within that area. And we'd also like to bring in Chris from New York to tell us more about the Workday Olympics.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
All right, welcome, Chris. I'm going to point out to people that Chris and GQR sponsored drinks last year in Orlando at the Sherathon dinner. And Chris sent me a message a number of weeks ago. Hey, what do you think about doing Workday Olympics? So Chris, feel free to explain whatever you want here, how the idea came to you, you name it.
Sure. Yeah, with everything going on with the pandemic, obviously the Tokyo Olympics got canceled and the Workday Rising sadly got pushed to next year. So I was trying to think of a good way to get the community together for something fun and maybe interactive and maybe less awkward than video conference drinks. So I thought about a Workday themed Olympics where we would have a few different events, some team and some individual events. And I think what we're leaning towards, me and David are still deciding on the final event list, but there's going to be a few team events, rug versus rug company teams, where different people from the same company compete against other companies, and then form your own dream team where you can compete against other teams. And then the individual events might be something like 10 questions on financials or payroll. We're going to do them all as consecutive events, like one day of watching the Olympics, but active participation. So yes, start thinking about your teams. And we are definitely receptive to specific events or requests. We want this to be interactive and a fun time. And keep an eye out on LinkedIn and community for more info there. Yeah, we got about 2 weeks until that specific event next.
Yeah, in 2 weeks, we'll have the show exactly in 2 weeks. We'll be doing some Sherathon prizes in 2 weeks, and that'll be, a day and a half before the Olympics start. And Andre's working on getting teams in Europe. And Chris, I don't know if you've been watching the chat, but we already have a dream team formed through the chats. I posted this, that people should know here on the Sharing Show, we're first name only, right? This is Chris from New York. I'm David from California. The Olympics, that's an option for you. The Sherathon's different. Sherathon's people actually networking. The Olympics, you don't even have to reveal your first name if you don't want. Team name is important, but other than that, it's one fun day, Friday, October 2nd.
Yes, and we're going to sort out, there will be prizes for gold, silver, bronze, and a lot of bragging rights.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Now we'd like to thank our co-sponsor, Dovetail. Dovetail's been here with us from the beginning. Dovetail provides HR service delivery software that reduces the number of questions into HR by over 50%. Dovetail also provides emergency response management software that provides HR with tools to manage all coronavirus-related questions from employees, along with symptom checking and contact tracing. Dovetail is also tracking COVID-19 case volumes from HR teams globally. And to learn more, please visit dovetailsoftware.com.
Kane, back to you here to wrap us up.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you, David, Ryan, Logan, Teresa, and special thank you to all our guests for speaking on the show today. As always, we do publish the episodes on YouTube, so head over to our channel, The Sharing Show, click on the like and subscribe. Like all the videos, that would be great. And if you click on subscribe and set the notification bell, you will know when this episode is posted. And if you miss any in future, you'll know when they're posted too. We're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. So all that's left to say is, everybody, have a great work day.